Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It was 2:17 a.m. when I saw someone else wearing my face. I'd gotten up to pee like I do most nights. My bladder isn't what it used to be at 43. The bathroom light flickered twice before staying on. I needed to change that bulb. My eyes were half closed, still heavy with sleep. I didn't bother looking in the mirror above the sink at first. Just did my business, flushed, ran the tap. That's when I saw it. Just a quick glance as I reached for the hand soap. In the mirror I wore a black suit with a red tie, but I stood there in my white t-shirt and boxers. My brain took 3 full seconds to process what was wrong. I jerked my head back up. The mirror showed exactly what it should. Me in my ratty sleep clothes. Hair a mess, eyes puffy. Nothing unusual. I gripped the edge of the sink. The porcelain felt cold and solid under my fingers. My heart thumped against my ribs. I counted my breaths. In, out, in, out. Must have been seeing things, just tired. Needed more sleep. I shut off the light and went back to bed. Sarah was still asleep, curled on her side like always. Her breathing stayed slow and regular. I lay there staring at the ceiling until my pulse settled down. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been nothing. Just one of those weird half-awake moments where reality gets fuzzy. Sarah made pancakes. We ate breakfast. I went to work. Normal Tuesday. But that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. After Sarah fell asleep, I got up again. 1:46 a.m. The bathroom mirror looked ordinary. Just showed me standing there in my t-shirt, as expected. I leaned closer, examining every detail. Same gray eyes. Same crooked nose from breaking it playing hockey in high school. Same small scar on my chin. The light flickered once. In that split second of darkness, something changed. When the bulb steadied, the reflection wore a different t-shirt, dark blue instead of white. I blinked hard. The image snapped back to normal. My hands shook as I splashed cold water on my face. The mirror me did the same thing at the same time. Everything lined up perfectly. Water dripped down my chin. I touched my face. The reflection's hand moved in sync. "Get it together," I whispered. The mirror lips matched my words exactly. I spent the next hour sitting on the closed toilet lid, staring at the mirror. Nothing else happened. Just me looking tired and scared. Dark circles under my eyes growing deeper as the minutes ticked by. Wednesday night, 3:22 a.m. This time the reflection wore a gray sweater I'd never seen before. It lasted almost 5 seconds before matching reality again. Long enough for me to notice details. Cable knit pattern, V-neck collar, sleeves pushed up to the elbows. My reflection's expression stayed neutral while I felt my own face twist in shock. I didn't tell Sarah. What could I say? "Hey honey, I keep seeing myself wearing different clothes in the mirror." She'd think I was losing it. Maybe I was. I started avoiding mirrors, shaved by feel, got dressed without looking. Sarah noticed something was off. "You okay?" she asked Thursday morning. "You seem jumpy." "Just stressed about work," I lied. She frowned but didn't push it. Friday night I broke my no mirror rule. Had to know if it was still happening. 12:58 a.m. The reflection wore a brown leather jacket. This time it moved wrong too. While I stood frozen, mirror me tilted his head and smiled. Just slightly. Just enough to show he wasn't copying me anymore. I stumbled backward. My heel caught the bath mat. I sat down hard on the tile floor. When I looked up, the reflection showed me sitting there in my usual sleepwear, rubbing my bruised tailbone. Normal again. I didn't sleep that night. Or Saturday night. By Sunday morning, the lack of rest was getting to me. I kept zoning out at breakfast. Dropped a plate while doing dishes. Sarah definitely knew something was wrong now. "Talk to me," she said, touching my arm. What's going on? I shook my head. Nothing. Just not sleeping well. Maybe you should see someone. Get something prescribed. Yeah, maybe. But I knew pills wouldn't help. Not with this. Sunday night. 11:34 p.m. I sat in the dark bathroom waiting. The mirror was just a gray rectangle in the dimness. My phone screen lit up my face with a weak blue glow as I checked the time every few minutes. At midnight exactly, I flicked on the light. The reflection wore a black suit again like that first night. But this time there was blood on the collar. A small, dark stain just visible above the red tie. Mirror Me smiled wider than any expression on my real face. He raised one hand and beckoned. I ran, slammed the door, pressed my back against it, breathing hard. Sarah called from the bedroom. Everything okay? Fine. My voice cracked. Just stubbed my toe. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Couldn't focus anyway. Spent hours researching mirror phenomena, supernatural occurrences, mental health symptoms. Found nothing useful. Just creepypasta stories and medical articles about various psychoses. By Monday night, I hadn't slept in almost 72 hours. Everything felt slightly unreal. The edges of objects left trails when I moved my head too fast. Sarah insisted I take a sleeping pill. I agreed just to stop her worrying. 3:47 a.m. The pill hadn't worked. I lay in bed, eyes burning, mind racing. Had to pee again. Tried to hold it. Couldn't. The mirror showed me in a hospital gown, splattered with red. The reflection's smile stretched impossibly wide. His hands pressed against the glass from the other side. I heard a crack. Thin lines spread across the mirror's surface like a spider web. I ran again. Locked myself in the bedroom. Sarah woke up. What's wrong? She turned on the lamp. Jesus, you look awful. I told her everything. Had to. The words poured out in a jumbled rush. Each time I saw the other me, the different clothes, the blood, the smile, the cracking glass. She didn't believe me, of course. How could she? But she saw how terrified I was. Called my doctor right then at 4 a.m. Got an emergency appointment for first thing in the morning. Just try to rest, she said. I'll stay up with you. I couldn't rest. Couldn't close my eyes. Kept seeing that wide smile, those reaching hands. The doctor prescribed antipsychotics, ran tests, found nothing physically wrong with me. Recommended a psychiatrist. Sarah scheduled an appointment for the following week. That night, I took the pills. They made everything fuzzy, distant, but I still got up to use the bathroom at 2:13 a.m., still looked in the mirror. The reflection wore my face, but the rest was wrong. Twisted, elongated limbs, too many fingers, blood dripping from the ceiling behind him. The crack in the glass spread further with a sound like breaking ice. I stumbled back to bed. Sarah held me while I shook, said she'd call a hotel in the morning. We'd stay there until we could find a new place. Get rid of the mirror. It won't help, I said. He'll find other mirrors. He's waiting. It's not real, she insisted. The pills will help. We'll figure this out. 5:56 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Sarah dozed next to me. I heard something from the bathroom. A quiet tap, tap, tap. I got up. Had to look. Had to know. The mirror had shattered completely. Shards of glass covered the floor, crunching under my bare feet. Blood dripped from the empty frame. In each broken piece, I saw a different version of myself. Different clothes, different wounds, different smiles, all watching, all reaching. The largest shard reflected the black suit again. Mirror Me pressed his hands against the other side of the glass. The barrier between us felt tissue thin now. I touched my fingertips to the surface. Cold, then warm, then gone. Sarah found the bathroom empty that morning. Just broken glass and blood on the floor. My side of the bed was still warm. Now I watch her through the mirror sometimes. Watch myself walk through our house wearing clothes I never owned. Watch my smile grow wider each day. I'm still here, just on the wrong side now. And sometimes, late at night, I see someone else's reflection looking back at me through the glass. Someone wearing my face, but not quite right. I raise my hand and beckon. I'm writing this down because I need someone to believe me. 3 weeks ago, I started fixing the old wooden fence in my backyard. That's when everything changed. The wood was rotting, posts were leaning, the whole thing needed work. I bought pressure-treated lumber from Home Depot and started the job on a Saturday morning. The air was cold. My breath made clouds in front of my face. I pulled out the first broken post and dug the hole deeper. That's when I felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not the normal kind, like when a neighbor glances over while getting their mail. This was different. More focused. More intense. I turned around. There she was. A woman stood at the far corner of my property, partially hidden behind my maple tree. She wore a gray dress that hung loose on her thin frame. Her hair was dark and long. She didn't move. I raised my hand to wave. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the quiet morning air. She didn't wave back, didn't speak, just watched. I set down my shovel. Can I help you with something? She stepped behind the tree. I walked toward her, my boots crunching on frozen grass. When I reached the tree, she was gone. I checked behind the tree. Nothing. I looked around my yard, then at my neighbor's yards. Empty. No gates had opened or closed. No car had started. She had vanished. I went back to work on the fence, but my hands shook slightly. The hair on my arm stood up despite the heavy jacket I wore. I kept looking over my shoulder. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, replaying the scene in my mind. Her stillness bothered me most. Normal people shift their weight, scratch their nose, blink. She had been completely motionless. Sunday morning, I went back to work on the fence. New post hole digger in hand, I attacked the next section. The temperature had dropped overnight. Frost covered the grass. She appeared again. Same spot, same gray dress, same blank stare. This time I walked toward her immediately. Hey, who are you? She retreated behind the tree. Again, when I reached it, she was gone. No footprints in the frost, no disturbed grass, nothing. I knocked on my neighbor Tom's door. He opened it wearing a Patriot sweatshirt and holding a coffee mug. Hey Tom, quick question. Have you seen a woman hanging around my yard? Gray dress, long dark hair. His expression changed. The friendly smile disappeared. Come inside for a minute. I followed him into his kitchen. He set down his coffee and leaned against his counter. The previous owner, Gary, mentioned something similar before he moved. Said he'd see a woman watching him from that exact spot. Always by that maple tree. Always in gray. He'd try to approach her, but she'd vanish. Started happening right after he put up that fence. My stomach dropped. When was this? About 8 years ago. He sold the house a few months later, said he couldn't take it anymore. I thought he was drinking too much, making things up. But now, I went home and Googled the history of my house. Built in 1928, 5 previous owners. Nothing unusual in the public records. No deaths reported at the address. No news stories. Nothing that explained what I was seeing. The next weekend, I had to finish the fence. The posts were already purchased, and leaving the job half done wasn't an option. I started early, hoping to beat whatever was happening. She appeared as soon as I picked up my tools. This time I ignored her, kept working. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. My shoulders ached from tension. From the corner of my eye, I saw her move. Not behind the tree this time. She took a step toward me. I spun around. She stood 10 feet closer than before. Her face was clearer now. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed into a thin line. My heart pounded. My mouth went dry. I gripped the post hole digger like a weapon. She took another step. Her movements were wrong, too smooth, like she was sliding rather than walking. I backed away. What do you want? Her mouth opened. No sound came out. But her eyes, they focused on the fence. the new posts I was putting in, then back to me. I dropped the tools and ran inside, locked the door, pulled the blinds, sat on my couch shaking for hours. That night I heard scratching sounds from my backyard, like nails on wood. I didn't look. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Spent the day researching the area's history. The local library had newspapers going back to the 1900s. I read through decades of microfilm. On page 6 of the Evening Herald, September 15, 1927, I found it. A small article about a construction accident. A woman named Eleanor Mills died when she fell into a hole while workers were putting in fence posts on a new housing development. My street. My lot. I kept reading. Her body wasn't found for 3 days. The hole had filled with rainwater. By then, I stopped reading. The fence needed to be finished. I couldn't leave holes in my yard. But now I understood. The next Saturday, I started earlier than usual. Dawn was just breaking. Frost covered everything. She appeared immediately. Closer than ever before, 20 feet away. I set down my tools, looked directly at her. Eleanor Mills? Her head tilted slightly. The first real reaction I'd seen. I know what happened to you. I'm sorry. It must have been horrible. She moved closer. 10 feet away now. I forced myself not to run. I have to fix this fence. It's not safe with holes in the ground, but I'll be careful, I promise. She stood still for a long moment, then nodded. Once, sharp and quick. I picked up my tools with trembling hands, started working. She watched. Every time I dug a hole, she moved closer, watching, making sure I was careful, making sure no one else would suffer her fate. When I finished the last post, I looked up. She was gone. I haven't seen her since. The fence is solid now, safe. The holes are filled. Maybe that's all she wanted. But sometimes when I'm in my yard, I feel that watching sensation again. Not hostile, not frightening anymore. More like someone making sure everything stays right, stays safe. I leave a small light on in my backyard every night now. And when the anniversary of her death comes each September, I lay flowers by the maple tree. Tom asked me recently if I'd seen the woman in gray again. I told him no, but I didn't tell him about the light I leave on, or the flowers, or the way the maple leaves sometimes move when there's no wind. Some things are better left unsaid. Some presences are better left undisturbed. The fence is fixed. The holes are filled. And Eleanor Mills can rest knowing no one else will share her fate. But I still check the corner of my yard every morning when I leave for work, just to be sure, just to see. And sometimes in the early dawn light I catch a glimpse of gray among the shadows, a reminder that not all hauntings are harmful. Sometimes they're just making sure we're safe. The fence stands strong now. I check the posts regularly, ensure nothing is loose or rotting. It's the least I can do. For her, for everyone's safety. Last week, a new family moved in next door. They have young children. I made sure to tell them the fence was recently repaired, that all the posts are secure, that it's safe to play near. I didn't tell them about Eleanor, about the woman in gray, about the watching presence in the corner of the yard. Some stories don't need to be shared. Some guardians don't need to be revealed. But every morning I nod toward the maple tree. A small gesture of acknowledgement, of understanding, of respect. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see a slight movement in return, a tilt of a ghostly head, a shift of a gray dress. The fence remains strong, the yard remains safe, and Eleanor Mills remains at her post, ensuring no one else falls into darkness. That's all she wants. That's all she's ever wanted. And as long as I live here, I'll help her keep that promise. Keep everyone safe, keep the fence strong, keep the memory alive. It's the least I can do for the woman behind the tree. My boots crunched on dead leaves. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees. I'd been hiking alone for 6 hours on this remote trail in the Cascade Mountains. The path wound through dense pine forest. No cell service. No other hikers all day. Just me and my backpack. I smelled smoke. Not forest fire smoke. Campfire smoke. Sweet, like burning cedar. The trail curved right. Through the trees, I spotted a clearing. Someone had set up camp there. No people visible. Just a small tent and some gear scattered around. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. Something felt wrong. The campfire still had glowing embers. Red coals pulsed under gray ash. But no one was there. Their gear lay everywhere, like they left in a hurry. A sleeping bag half out of the tent. A camping stove knocked on its side. Food wrapper torn open. Granola bars spilled across the ground. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the quiet forest. No answer. I took a few steps into the clearing. More details jumped out. Boot prints in the dirt going in all directions. A water bottle tipped over, contents making a dark patch on the ground. The tent flap fluttered. Inside, an empty backpack, clothes scattered around. A flashlight still on. Batteries almost dead. Beam barely visible in the late afternoon light. My heart beat faster. Sweat formed on my neck, despite the cool air. I scanned the trees around the clearing. Nothing moved. A piece of tree bark caught my eye. It lay next to the fire pit, something written on it in charcoal. I picked it up. The message was short. Stay quiet. It's still nearby. My hands started shaking. I set the bark down exactly where I found it. A twig snapped in the forest behind me. I spun around. The woods looked the same. Dense trees, long shadows. But now every shadow could hide something. Another crack. Closer. Like something heavy stepping on a branch. I backed toward the trail. My breathing sounded too loud. Had to control it, had to stay quiet. A bird burst from a nearby tree. I jumped. The sudden movement sent my heart racing even faster. More sounds from the forest. Rustling leaves. The soft thud of footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Too deliberate. Too heavy. I reached the trail. Fight every instinct to run. Running makes noise. Noise attracts attention. The footsteps circled the clearing. Always just out of sight. Moving through the trees. Getting closer. A branch moved. No wind to move it. 20 yards away. Then another branch. 15 yards. I eased backwards down the trail, one slow step at a time, eyes locked on the moving branches. Something dark passed between two trees, too quick to make out the shape, but big, taller than a person. My foot found a loose rock. It clattered down the trail. The sound echoed through the trees. The movement in the forest stopped. Complete silence fell over the woods. No birds, no wind, nothing. I held my breath, counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. A low growl came from the trees. Deep, vibrating in my chest. Not like any animal I knew. I ran. Forget quiet. Forget stealth. Pure survival instinct took over. I sprinted down the trail. Branches whipped my face. Rocks tried to trip me. I ran anyway. The thing crashed through the forest parallel to the trail, faster than me. The growl turned into a roar. I looked over my shoulder. Bad idea. My foot caught a root. I slammed into the ground. Pain shot through my hands and knees. The crashing sounds converged on my position, coming straight at me now. I scrambled up, grabbed a stick from the ground. A weak weapon, but better than nothing. Through the trees, I saw it. Just glimpses between the trunks. Tall. Dark. Moving in a way nothing should move. The stick shook in my hands. My whole body trembled. The taste of copper filled my mouth. It burst from the tree line. I threw the stick. Useless. It bounced off. The thing didn't even slow down. I ran again. Legs burning. Lungs on fire. Brain screaming to move faster. The roar right behind me now. Hot breath on my neck, claws swiping at my back. The trail dropped steeply. I half ran, half fell down it. Rocks cut my hands. I kept going. A fallen tree blocked the path. No time to go around. I dove over it, landed hard, rolled, got up running. The thing hit the log behind me. Wood splintered. The crash echoed through the forest. I spotted a cliff face ahead. Dark opening in the rock. A cave. Better than running in the open. I sprinted for it. The entrance was narrow. Had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Cut my arm on sharp rock. Didn't care. Inside, the cave opened up. Darkness swallowed me. I pressed against the wall. Tried to silence my breathing. Massive shape blocked the cave mouth. The thing sniffed the air. Claws scraped on rock. Too big to fit through the narrow entrance. It roared in frustration. The sound bounced off cave walls, hammered my eardrums. I inched deeper into the cave. One slow step at a time. Had to get away from the entrance. My foot found empty air. I windmilled my arms, caught myself before falling into darkness. The thing still blocked the only way out. I felt along the cave wall, found a ledge, pressed myself against it. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time lost meaning in the dark. The shape at the entrance didn't move. Patient. Waiting. My legs shook from standing still. Sweat soaked my clothes despite the cave's chill. Had to think. Had to plan. Couldn't stay here forever. My hand touched something on the ledge. I froze. Slowly, carefully I felt the object. Smooth. Cold. Metal. A flashlight. I clicked it on. Weak beam, like the one in the tent, but enough to see. The ledge continued along the cave wall, led to another opening. Smaller tunnel branching off. Looking back at the entrance. The thing still there. Still watching. I had two choices. Stay here until it left, or try for the tunnel. Movement caught my eye. On the cave floor, writing scratched into the rock. Same handwriting as the bark message. Don't use light. It draws them. Them. Plural. I clicked off the flashlight. New sounds echoed through the cave. Not from the entrance. From the tunnel. Scraping. Clicking. Getting closer. The thing at the entrance growled. Answering growls came from the tunnel. I pressed harder against the wall. Nowhere left to go. The clicking sounds reached my ledge. Hot breath from multiple directions. I closed my eyes. Not that it mattered in the dark. Claws found me. That was 3 days ago. I'm writing this from a hospital bed. The doctors don't believe my story. They focus on treating the claw marks, the broken bones, the infections. They ask how I escaped. I tell them I don't remember. That's a lie. I remember everything. The teeth, the eyes, the impossible shapes of their bodies. I remember how they fought over me, how their battle gave me a chance to slip away, how I crawled out of that cave as their roars shook the mountain. I remember running through the night forest, falling, getting up, running more, until I found a road, a car. Help. The police searched the area, found the campsite exactly as I described, found the messages, found my blood in the cave, but they didn't find them. Now I watch the news. Reports of missing hikers in those mountains, more every month. I see the search parties go out, see the dogs refuse to track, see the helicopters search empty forest. I want to warn people, tell them what's really out there. But who would believe me? So I write this instead. My true account. Take it as you will. Just remember, if you're hiking alone and find a recently abandoned camp, if you see a message written in charcoal, if you hear something moving through the trees, don't run, don't hide, don't fight. Just know it's already too late, because they're never alone, and they're always hungry. My doctors say I can leave the hospital next week. They tell me I'm lucky to be alive. They ask if I'll go hiking again. I tell them no. That's another lie. I'm going back to those mountains, back to that cave, not to hike, Not to explore, to hunt, because now I know their tactics, know their weaknesses, know how they think. I won't be alone this time, won't be unprepared. They think they're the hunters. Time to show them they're wrong. The police won't help, the rangers won't believe, so it has to be me. Someone has to stop them. Someone has to end this, even if it costs me everything. I check my calendar. Full moon in 2 weeks, perfect hunting weather. I started running at night 6 months ago. The suburbs are different after dark, quieter, empty. The streetlights cast long shadows. Houses become dark shapes against the sky. My route takes me through Maple Grove, a development built in the 1960s. Same houses, same lawns, same mailboxes. I know every crack in the sidewalk by now. Every barking dog, every motion sensor light that clicks on when I pass. That Tuesday night in October felt normal at first. Temperature in the low 50s. Clear sky. Good running weather. I had done 3 miles and was heading back home when I saw him. A man stood in the front yard of 247 Oak Street, just standing there, completely still. Face turned up toward the second-floor windows, arms at his sides. He wore dark clothes, maybe a jacket and pants. Hard to tell in the dim light. I slowed down. Most of my neighbors were inside by 9 p.m. This guy wasn't moving at all, like a statue. "Evening," I called out, still jogging in place. My breath made little clouds in the cold air. No response, no movement, not even a twitch. "Hey there," I tried again, louder this time. "Everything okay?" Nothing. The man kept staring up at the house. The windows were dark. No lights inside. My heart started beating faster, and not from running. Something felt wrong. The stillness, the silence, the way he just stood there, frozen. I took a few steps closer, staying on the sidewalk. "Sir, do you need help?" The streetlight behind him made it hard to see his face, just a dark shape against the house. But I had this feeling, this certainty, that he wasn't really looking at the windows, that his eyes were closed, or empty, or something worse. My skin went cold. The night suddenly felt darker, heavier. The houses around us were silent boxes full of shadows. I backed away slowly, then turned and ran. Didn't look back until I was 2 blocks away. The man was still there, still staring, still motionless. I sprinted the rest of the way home, locked the door, took a hot shower, tried to convince myself I was being stupid, just some guy looking at a house, probably a real estate agent checking out a property, or a former owner feeling nostalgic. Normal explanation. Had to be. But I couldn't shake the wrongness of it, the unnatural stillness, the complete lack of response, the way the darkness seemed to gather around him. The next morning, I drove past 247 Oak Street on my way to work. The yard was empty, no sign anyone had been there. The grass was overgrown, paint peeling off the shutters, mailbox stuffed with yellowed papers. I pulled over, walked up to the front door, noticed the thick layer of dust on the handle, the cobwebs in the corners, the dead leaves piled against the foundation. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was walking her dog. I waved her over. "Hey, Mrs. Chen." "Quick question. Do you know who lives here?" She frowned. "Nobody lives there. House has been empty since the Petersons moved out in 2019. Bank foreclosure, I think. They couldn't keep up the payments after Mr. Peterson lost his job." My mouth went dry. Nobody's bought it since then. No buyers. Real estate agent said it needs too much work. Probably tear it down eventually. She tugged on her dog's leash. "Why do you ask?" "Thought I saw someone in the yard last night." Her frown deepened. "Impossible. Place is locked up tight. I keep an eye on it. Call the police if I see any teenagers trying to break in. Nobody's been near that house in years." I thanked her and went back to my car. Sat there for a long time, staring at those dark windows, the empty yard where the man had stood. That night I almost skipped my run. But that felt like letting fear win. I'm not superstitious. Don't believe in ghosts or monsters. There had to be a logical explanation. I took my usual route, approached Oak Street from the opposite direction, slowed down as I got closer to number 247. The yard was empty, just dead grass and fallen leaves in the dim light. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then I saw movement in an upstairs window, a shadow passing by. Gone so fast I couldn't be sure it was real. I stopped running, stood on the sidewalk, heart pounding, watched the house. Nothing moved. No lights, no sounds, just the wind rustling dead leaves across the yard. Something made me walk closer, up the cracked driveway, past the overgrown bushes, to the spot where the man had stood. The grass was undisturbed. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. I looked up at the second-floor windows, tried to see what he had been staring at. Just darkness behind dirty glass. A cold breeze hit me. Goosebumps rose on my arms. The shadows between the houses seemed to deepen. I turned to leave, stopped. There was something carved into the trunk of the oak tree beside me. Letters, crude and jagged like someone had used a knife. Come inside. The cuts looked fresh, pale wood showing through dark bark. I ran, faster than I'd ever run before. Didn't slow down until I reached my street. Lungs burning, legs shaking. That night, I lay awake in bed, thinking about the man, the carving, the shadow in the window. None of it made sense. I called the police the next morning, reported a possible break-in at 247 Oak Street, mentioned the man I'd seen. The officer took notes, said they'd check it out. They called back that afternoon. No signs of forced entry. All doors and windows secure. No footprints or evidence anyone had been on the property. Case closed. I went online. Searched local news archives for anything about the house or the Peterson family. Found a few articles about the foreclosure. Nothing unusual. Just another victim of the 2008 recession, finally losing their home years later. But one detail caught my eye. The bank had trouble selling the house because of its history. In 1973, the previous owner had murdered his wife and 2 children before hanging himself in the basement. The article included a grainy black and white photo of the crime scene. My hands started shaking. The man in the photo, standing on the front lawn, being led away in handcuffs, wore dark clothes. His face was turned up toward the second-floor windows. I closed my laptop, went for a drive to clear my head, found myself parking outside 247 Oak Street. The house looked different in daylight. Shabby, abandoned, not scary at all, just a rundown building waiting to be demolished. I noticed something new. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel driveway, recent footprints in the mud by the front steps. Someone had been here since yesterday. I got out of my car, walked up to the house. The footprints led to the front door, then disappeared. The door was slightly open. I should have left. Called the police. Done anything except what I did next. I pushed the door open. It swung inward with a long creak. The entryway was dark. Dust motes floated in the beam of sunlight from the doorway. The air smelled stale, moldy. Hello? My voice echoed slightly. Anyone here? No answer. Just the settling sounds of an old house. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, swept the beam across peeling wallpaper, empty rooms, bare floors covered in dust and dead leaves. Footprints led up the stairs. I followed them. Each step groaned under my weight. The second floor was darker, colder. The footprints ended at a closed door at the end of the hall. My hands were sweating, heart hammering against my ribs, every instinct screaming at me to run. I reached for the doorknob. It turned before I touched it. The door swung open slowly. Cold air rushed out. The room was empty except for a single chair facing the windows. The same windows the man had been staring at. Someone sat in the chair, a dark shape against the dim light. Hello? My voice came out as a whisper. The figure didn't move. I took a step closer. Another. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. My flashlight beam hit the chair. It was empty. Something moved behind me. A soft footstep. I spun around. The man stood in the doorway. Dark clothes. Face turned up slightly. Eyes closed. No, not closed. Gone. Just smooth, blank skin where eyes should be. I screamed, tried to run past him. His hand shot out, grabbed my arm, skin cold as ice. "Welcome home," he said in a voice like rustling leaves. I yanked free, pushed past him, ran down the hall, down the stairs, out the front door into the sunlight. Didn't stop running until I reached my house. Locked every door and window. Sat in my bedroom with all the lights on until dawn. The police came again when I called. Found nothing. No footprints, no open door, no sign anyone had been inside. They suggested I stop running at night, get some rest, maybe talk to someone about stress and anxiety. I sold my house 3 months later, moved to an apartment downtown, started running on a treadmill at the gym. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about 247 Oak Street, about the man in the yard, about what he wanted to show me in that upstairs room. And sometimes when I can't sleep, I look out my apartment window at the city lights below. There's a figure standing on the sidewalk, face turned up toward my window, arms at its sides, completely still, waiting. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. with sweat running down my neck. The old man's face was still clear in my mind. His wrinkled skin had looked like dried leather, and his cloudy eyes had stared right through me. In the dream, he'd grabbed my arm with bony fingers and said only 5 words: "You must check the wiring." My heart was still racing. The room felt too hot, even though the September night was cool. I got up and walked to the bathroom. The floor creaked under my feet. I splashed cold water on my face and looked in the mirror. My reflection showed dark circles under my eyes. I hadn't been sleeping well since Sarah left 3 weeks ago. The house felt different at night. Every sound seemed louder. The old radiators clicked and hissed. Wind pushed against the windows. The place was built in 1932, and sometimes it felt like every year showed. I tried going back to bed. I lay there for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling. The old man's face kept coming back. "You must check the wiring." The words wouldn't leave my head. "Fine," I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the empty room. I got up and put on jeans and a t-shirt. The hardwood floor was cold under my bare feet. I went to the garage and found my flashlight and toolbox. The metal handle of the toolbox was ice cold. The attic access was in the upstairs hallway. I pulled down the folding ladder. It made a grinding noise that seemed too loud in the quiet house. Dust fell from the edges of the opening. I pointed the flashlight up. The beam showed cobwebs and old insulation. The air that came down smelled like mothballs and wood rot. I hadn't been up there since buying the house 2 years ago. The ladder creaked as I climbed. Each step felt unstable. My head and shoulders entered the attic space. The air was thick and hot. I pulled myself up onto the plywood flooring. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Boxes and old furniture made strange shadows. A broken rocking chair sat in one corner. Someone had left Christmas decorations from decades ago. The colors were faded, and the cardboard boxes had collapsed. The wiring ran along the roof beams. Most of it was old knob and tube stuff, probably original to the house. Black rubber insulation cracked and peeling. Some newer wiring had been added later, creating a maze of cables. I crawled forward on my hands and knees. The plywood creaked. Fiberglass insulation stuck to my jeans. The space was too low to stand up. The flashlight showed more cobwebs. They brushed against my face and I kept wiping them away. The beam caught something moving. Just a spider running across a beam. I checked the wiring foot by foot. Everything looked old but intact. Then I saw it. A junction box with scorch marks around the edges. The cover was loose. When I touched it, it was warm. My heart started beating faster. I opened my toolbox and got a screwdriver. The cover came off easily. Inside, the wires were a mess. Someone had done a bad splice job. The copper was exposed where the insulation had melted. This could have started a fire. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned around fast. The flashlight beam swung wildly across the attic. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the shadows. "Hello?" My voice sounded small. No answer. Just the wind outside and the settling of the old house. I turned back to the junction box. My hands were shaking as I started fixing the wires. I stripped the burnt sections and replaced them with fresh wire nuts. Another creak. Closer this time. I spun around again. The flashlight beam caught something. A face. The same face from my dream. Leather skin. Cloudy eyes. But worse now. Much worse. The thing that had been an old man smiled. Its teeth were long and wrong. The skin of its face was pulled too tight over the bones. Those cloudy eyes had no pupils at all. I scrambled backward. My elbow hit the junction box. Sparks flew. The flashlight beam jumped around the attic as I moved. The thing stayed where it was. Its head tilted at an impossible angle. The smile got wider. "You saw the wiring," it said. The voice was like dry leaves scraping concrete. "Good boy." I tried to speak. My throat was too dry. It took a step forward. The movement was wrong, too smooth, like it was floating. Its feet didn't touch the floor. "But now you've seen me," it said. "That's not good at all." I hit another beam with my back. Trapped. The thing kept coming closer. Its fingers were too long. They stretched out toward me. "Sarah saw me too," it said. "She ran away. Smart girl." The name of my ex-girlfriend hit me like a punch. "What did you do to her?" It laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. "Nothing. She was smart. She ran. You should have run too." Its face was inches from mine now. I could smell its breath, like old meat and burnt wire. "But you stayed," it said. "You came up here. Now we have to play." I swung the flashlight at its head. It moved faster than anything should move. Its hand caught my wrist. The fingers were ice cold. They squeezed until I dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the floor. In the strobing light, I saw its true form. The human shape was just a shell. Underneath, something dark moved like smoke. I punched with my free hand. My fist went through its chest like hitting fog. Cold spread up my arm. It pulled me closer. Those cloudy eyes filled my vision. "The wiring was just the bait," it whispered. "I've been so hungry." I screamed. The sound echoed in the attic. The thing's mouth opened wider than any mouth should open. Rows of teeth spiraled down its throat. The cold spread through my whole body. I kicked hard. My foot hit the junction box. More sparks flew. In that flash of light, I saw the thing flinch. Understanding hit me. I kicked the box again. The sparks were brighter. The thing's grip loosened. I ripped my arm free and dove for the junction box. My fingers found the exposed wires. Pain shot through my hand as electricity arced. The attic exploded with light. The thing screamed, a sound like metal tearing. Its form wavered like heat waves over hot pavement. I grabbed more wires. The electricity felt like fire in my veins, but the light got brighter. The thing's edges started to burn. "No," it said. Its voice wasn't smooth anymore. It crackled and popped. "No, no, no, no." The light grew until I had to close my eyes. The scream got higher and higher. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was alone in the attic. The flashlight beam showed empty shadows. My hands were burned from the wires. My whole body shook. I scrambled to the attic access and practically fell down the ladder. I ran to my bedroom and grabbed my phone. My fingers shook as I dialed Sarah's number. It rang 4 times. Then her voice. "Hello?" "Sarah," I said. My voice was hoarse. Did you see something in the attic before you left?" Silence for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "You saw it too?" "Yes." I looked up at the ceiling. "But I think it's gone now. I think I killed it." "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure, not really. But I said, "Yes." Another long silence. Then, "I'm coming over. Don't go back up there alone." She hung up. I sat on my bed, watching the attic access in the hallway. The ladder was still down. Shadows moved in the opening. I waited. Every noise made me jump. The house creaked and settled. The radiators hissed. Normal sounds. But now I knew. Some sounds weren't normal at all. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later. She had 2 flashlights and a toolbox of her own. We went up together. The attic was empty. Just boxes and dust and old wiring. We fixed the junction box properly. Replaced all the old wiring we could find. Worked until dawn started showing through the roof vents. The dream stopped after that. Sarah moved back in a week later. We never saw the thing again. But sometimes, late at night, we hear creaking in the attic. We tell ourselves it's just the house settling. We don't believe it, though. Not really. We keep the new wiring maintained. We check it every month. It's probably just superstition now. But we check anyway. Because sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that face. Those cloudy eyes. That impossible smile. And I wonder, what if it wasn't the only one? What if there are more of them out there, hiding in other old houses, whispering to people in their dreams, waiting in the darkness above their beds? I don't know. I don't want to know, but I keep checking the wiring just in case. The laugh came at 7:43 p.m. while I was eating microwaved lasagna, a deep rumbling laugh that shouldn't have been there. I dropped my fork. It clattered against the ceramic plate. The sound had come from the basement, my basement that had been locked for 6 years. I live alone on 40 acres of pine forest. My nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. I sat perfectly still at my kitchen table. The overhead light hummed. The laugh echoed again, louder this time. A man's laugh, rough and wild. My hand started to shake. Sweat formed on my forehead. The lasagna turned to ash in my mouth. I've lived in this house for 12 years. The basement door has been padlocked since my wife Sarah died. Her art studio was down there. After the funeral, I locked everything away. Her canvases, brushes, the half-finished paintings. I couldn't look at them anymore. The key sits in my bedside drawer, untouched. The laughter bounced off the walls again. My chest tightened. My heart pounded against my ribs. I pushed away from the table and stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound felt too loud in the quiet house. "Hello?" I called out. My voice cracked. "Is someone there?" Silence answered back. The old house creaked. Wind rattled the windows. Normal sounds that I knew, but that laugh, that wasn't normal. That wasn't possible. I walked to the basement door. My legs felt weak, shaky. The heavy padlock hung there, rusted but intact. No signs of tampering, no scratches around the keyhole. The door remained firmly shut, like it had been for 6 years. Another laugh erupted. This time I heard words mixed in. Garbled words I couldn't make out, but definitely speech. It vibrated through the floorboards under my feet. My stomach churned. I needed the key. I had to check. Had to know. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, taking them 2 at a time. The key was right where I'd left it, in the top drawer of my nightstand, wrapped in an old handkerchief. My fingers trembled as I unwrapped it. More laughter drifted up from below. Closer now. Clearer. It sounded like multiple voices talking and laughing together, like a party happening under my feet. I gripped the key tight and went back downstairs. The talking grew louder with each step. I could almost make out words, but not quite. Just the sound of voices having an animated conversation. At the basement door, I hesitated. The padlock felt cold against my palm. The key shook in my hand as I tried to line it up with the keyhole. I dropped it twice before managing to insert it. The lock clicked open. The sound felt final. Wrong. I should call the police, but what would I tell them? That I heard impossible laughter in my sealed basement? They'd think I was crazy. I pulled the padlock free. It was heavy in my hand. Real. Solid. This was really happening. The voices continued their muffled conversation below. With my heart in my throat, I turned the doorknob. It resisted at first, stiff from years of disuse. Then it gave way. The door creaked open. Stale air wafted up. Dust. Must. The smell of closed spaces and abandonment. The bare bulb at the top of the stairs still worked when I hit the switch. Yellow light illuminated the wooden steps leading down into darkness. The voices were clearer now. Multiple people talking and laughing. The sound bounced off the concrete walls. I still couldn't make out the words. My feet moved on their own. One step down, another. The old wood groaned under my weight. Sweat ran down my back. My breath came in short gasps. Halfway down, I stopped. The voices had gone quiet. The silence pressed against my ears. I gripped the railing hard enough that my knuckles turned white. "Hello?" I called again. My voice echoed in the empty space. "Who's down there?" The laughter exploded, loud, wild, unhinged, right below me. The light bulb flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. I jerked backward, stumbling up the stairs. My heel caught on a step. I fell hard, banging my elbow. Pain shot up my arm. The laughter followed me up. Heavy footsteps pounded on the stairs behind me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, slammed the basement door. The impact shook the frame. I fumbled with the padlock, dropped it. The doorknob rattled. Something pushed from the other side. The door shuddered in its frame. My fingers finally worked the padlock through the latch, clicked it shut. I backed away, breathing hard. The door continued to shake. The knob twisted back and forth violently. Then it stopped. Everything went quiet again. The only sound was my ragged breathing and pounding heart. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my basement, I gasped. Multiple people. I heard them. They tried to get out. What's your address, sir? I gave it to her. Explained I lived alone, that the basement had been locked for years, that I'd heard laughter and voices. Officers are on their way, she said. Stay on the line with me. Are you somewhere safe? I'm in the kitchen. The basement door is locked. Even as I said it, a new sound reached my ears. Scratching, coming from the walls, like something moving inside them. The police will be there in about 15 minutes, the operator said. Can you see or hear anything now? The scratching grew louder, spread. Now it seemed to come from all around me. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. As if dozens of things were crawling through the house's bones. They're scratching, I whispered. In the walls. Oh, God. The light bulb above me flickered. Once, twice, went out. The phone died in my hand. Complete darkness fell. The scratching stopped. In the silence, I heard breathing. Not my own. Heavy, wet breathing from multiple sources, surrounding me. The laughter started again. Close. So close. Right behind me. I ran. Slammed into the wall in the darkness. Found the front door by feel. Yanked it open and burst outside into the cold night air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Police cars coming up my long driveway. I stumbled down the porch steps, fell to my knees in the gravel. The laughter followed me out. It poured from the house like smoke, from the windows, the doors, every crack and crevice, mixed with screams now, howls, inhuman sounds that no human throat could make. The police cars skidded to a stop. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness. "Get back," I yelled. "Don't go in there." The house exploded with sound. Every window shattered outward. Glass rained down. The walls bulged, the front door ripped off its hinges. Darkness poured out, living darkness that moved and twisted and laughed. It rose into the sky like a column of smoke, took shape. Faces formed in it, horrible faces with too many eyes and too many teeth. The officers fired. The bullets passed through the darkness harmlessly. The faces laughed harder. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The darkness dissipated. The laughter faded. The night went quiet except for the idling engines of the police cars. We found the basement empty. No signs of intrusion. No footprints in the dust except mine. Sarah's art studio looked exactly as it had 6 years ago when I locked it up. Her unfinished paintings still sat on their easels, covered in cobwebs. But something had changed. Every canvas was blank. The half-finished paintings she'd been working on when she died, gone. As if they'd been erased, only empty white spaces remained. The police found no explanation. They took my statement, searched the property, filed their report, suggested it might have been a gas leak causing hallucinations, recommended I get my furnace checked. I didn't argue. How could I explain what really happened? The truth was in those blank canvases, in the lingering echo of that terrible laughter. I padlocked the basement door again, threw away the key, packed a bag and checked into a hotel, listed the house for sale the next day. But I still hear it sometimes late at night in my dreams. That wild, unhinged laughter. And underneath it, a woman's voice. Sarah's voice, screaming my name over and over and over. I never went back to the house. Never found out what was really in that basement. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some doors are better left locked. But I know this. Whatever was down there isn't finished with me. The laughter follows me, gets closer every night. One day it will catch up, and when it does, I'll finally learn the truth about what happened to Sarah's paintings, about what's really been waiting in that basement all these years. I just hope I survived the revelation.